Seems to hit the record. Okay, so what I might do is, do we give it more time? It's 7:05, or do we rip into it? What do you guys think?
I reckon go for it.
Go for it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is just move my zoom off to the side here a little bit and bring up a page. Okay, so this is obviously Bricks with the advanced thema installed. And what I'm going to look at today is a...
I don't think you're sharing your screen yet, mate.
It's not sharing? Okay,
No.
let me try that again. Bloody amateurs, eh?
There we go.
There we go. So basically, this is using WPCodeBox. I normally use Scripts Organizer, but I know most of the Bricks users are using WPCodeBox. So I've just refactored this into WPCodeBox. And as of the current release version 2 of WPCodeBox, it now supports what they call partials. So what I'm doing with this framework here is, this is SASS, and we've got some variables here, which is a partial, and we set a bunch of SASS variables, which you can see with the $sign is a SASS variable. So you've got some colors, which I'll go through that map into automatic thema, some basic colors, size of XS through to 5XL with a rem value, some header heights, which will measure at the different breakpoints, and text columns, buttons, form inputs, some call to action stuff, a couple of card basics. This is just basically, if you're familiar with using things like automatic CSS, you've got a WordPress admin UI where you've just got options you change. This is kind of a SASS way of doing the same thing. So you just change these variables to change the way the framework behaves. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, so we then, if we look at the framework, we're basically bringing in those variables and some SASS mixins, and then we're just looping through and creating our framework here. I'll go into great detail in another video if we wanted to look further at that. Just drag this down so I can never get rid of that little bar at the top for Zoom, which gets in the way when I'm sharing. So what this ends up producing is CSS that looks like this. Everyone see that okay? Or drag that across a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay, so what we end up with is, and I've got a plugin that I've created. I've got a GitHub repository where you can get the plugin, which I'll show you. So effectively what we're ending up with a CSS file, and what we're interested in is these comment blocks here where it's got at-category with a colon, and then we've got a name. And then we've got a bunch of CSS variables. And then we come down to another one with at-category-x offset, so a name. So as long as the CSS file has these comment blocks to separate these variables, what we end up with in automatic thema, we end up with those categories in here. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So as a quick example, I will rename one of these. So size options. So I'm just going to change the name of that category and save that. Go back to my test builder. Just going to refresh. Come on. Okay, now it's called Excite options. So it's completely integrated. So whatever changes we make in the SASS framework automatically appear in advanced thema. Okay.
That's fantastic.
Now, the other thing we'll look at is in here. So what I've done is I put all my CSS variables. Now, I tend to work with BEM class naming. So usually I work with CSS variables, not utilities. But sometimes the utilities are useful. So if we go down a bit further here, we get to where we start putting some utility classes in there. So I've got X border class white, exporter class black, and these are actually referencing the framework variables. And sometimes these are just a bit easier to use, just the utility. And the other thing you'll notice is that all of the framework that I'm doing, I'm all prefixing with X. So the variables have --X, and the classes have .x-, so we know it's come from the framework. Okay, so we've got some basic utility variables here, and they can be anywhere. Our buttons, this is a SASS loop, and we're creating a whole bunch of different button styles. So in the builder, if I added a button here, so I've got on the button, is this too small, or I might just zoom in a little bit there? So I've got X button outline and X button action alt. And that changes the behavior of that. So it's very similar to what ACSS is doing. Okay, so if I wanted that to be, now don't want the outline, just take the outline off, it's not an outline anymore.
Okay.
All right, and that's all from this loop here. That loop there, just looping through all of those color variables that we've got and creating all those variations. So if we wanted to add a variation, all we have to do is go to our variables and add a new color up here. And that's going to give us a completely different button variation. Making sense so far?
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the concept, and what we end up with in AT. I'll give you an example of this little section here. So basically, I've got a section, and I've added a utility, which is this images BG wrapper. And the other thing that's really cool with so this actually uses two WordPress filters that Maxime's made available. One that imports your classes and one that imports variables. And when you import variables, it automatically locks them. So they're shown in red here, so that you can't mess up your framework utilities. So
Okay.
if you want to edit that, you've got to unlock it. So you can't sort of set up your variables in here, sorry, your CSS there, and then override it in bricks by mistake. So that's really good that he's done that. But looking at this section here, so I've made it image as BG wrapper. And if we look at the CSS for that, down here somewhere, where are we? Okay. You get too many things, it starts to get harder. Why is that not there? There we go. Sure, I couldn't find that before. So the images BG wrapper just sets it to position relative and isolation isolate. So just adding that class to this section, we've added those two CSS properties. We then stick an image in there and we set that to be the images BG image. And you can see here that's setting the position absolute, top left, width 100% height. Whoops. Accidentally click that. Setting the object vector cover and the z-edX to -1. And because we've got to isolate on the wrapper, that puts it behind everything else in that wrapper. Okay, so that's the idea of doing that. Now, if we look at the section, actually looks at my theme, sorry, look at my theme settings here. In the element section, I'm using a clamp from AT as my top and bottom as my default, using 4XL. Okay, but on this section, I've decided I want that different. So in the layout, select that. I've told it to use the 2XL version instead, because I don't want it to be as big. Now, what we've done here is we've got some container here where we've got some negative margin on it. On the container, cards, Sorry, just go back through that. There we go. Don't know why that didn't come up. So on the container, we're using one of those framework variables for the CTA negative offset, which you can actually really call an AT. You can just start typing NEG, and there's my container CTA negative offset. Or you can use the variable picker and you can find it in there. Now, because we've got negative margin on this container here, and we're pushing it up into this section, we actually need more padding on that section to clear those calls to action. So to do that, we go back to that container, and all I have to do is add padding at the bottom of that as my CTA offset. And that gives us some clearance for that. So it's a really, for me, it's a really, really powerful way of having a very consistent framework. And I see Maxime's joined us now. One of the things I'll discuss while Maxime is here is I was trying to push Maxime a little bit to try and make this framework a bit of a standard to use with AT. But Maxime made a very good point where AT is not framework agnostic. So meaning that some people want to use it with Tailwind, some want to use it with ACSS, some want to use it with their own framework. So it's not something that's likely to be included with AT, so that it keeps it kind of independent. So if you want to do this, you need to use your own framework. Okay. All right. So is that enough of an explanation of why we do this? Yep. Okay. So that is why we do it. Now, how we do it is the other question. So what I've got here is I've got a GitHub repository, which I'll link when I put this up onto YouTube. Actually, I'll chuck that into the comments here as well, just so you guys have got it. Where are our comments gone? Chat. Just so you got the link to it. And we're going to download that zip file. Extract it. So this is straight from GitHub. All this Windows extraction is getting slower and slower. Okay, so what we've got in there is we've got the actual plugin. So there's AT_FW import. So you can either copy those files to your plugins folder, or you can zip it. And then you can use the add plugin in WordPress to upload this to WordPress. In fact, what I might do is I might spin up another, this one here, Advanced Thema. I'll just get rid of that plugin from there. Okay. So this is my plugin here. So once you've zipped it, zip that plugin, you can just add new, upload the plugin. My downloads. That's the plugin there. Install. And just activate. And what that does, under the bricks menu, we now have this AT_FW import. And in there, all we have to do is put the URL to the CSS generated by your code manager, in this case, WPCodeBox. So to find that, so here is the framework. To find it, basically go to the front end, have a look at your network, your CSS. I think this one's 3.css. It is. There's my framework there. So I'm going to copy the link address, go back into Advanced Thema here, and I'm going to stick that there, get rid of the query on the end of it. So that's all I need to do to make this work with that framework in WPCodeBox. Save that. Now in CodeBox, So unfortunately with WPCodeBox, I don't know of any way where you can export and import your code. You can share it through a cloud, your own personal cloud, but you can't export and import. So what you have to do here in CodeBox is go into the examples folder. Here's the sample framework files. We're going to get we'll start with the variables. So I'm just going to open this with Notepad. No, actually doesn't matter. Okay, there's not much to that. So you probably just create for the my variables. Well, we can just create those. So I'm just going to grab that name. In WPCodeBox, we're going to do a new snippet. We want it to be a SCSS partial, and we're going to call it my variables. Let's save that. Where's our save? We're then going to do a new snippet, and we'll call that the my framework. This is for your personal stuff that's outside of the framework. And that's going to be a partial as well. SCSS there. Save that. Another new snippet. I know it's a pain. I wish you could just import and export. Now we're going to use the framework variables. I'm going to save that as a snippet as well, as a partial. But with this one, there's going to be stuff you're going to have to copy. So Control-A, Control-C. Stick that into there. Save. We need one more partial, which is the mix-ins. It's also a SCSS partial. Check that in, save that. Now, next snippet is actually a SCSS file, not a partial, and we want to render that as an external file. Grab that, so it's what's called framework. Looks like a lot of mucking around, but what I tend to do is keep blueprint sites. So once you've done this once, you've got it set up for a blueprint site. You don't have to do it again. You just copy out your blueprint site. So we're going to save that. And we're going to enable that SASS file. So we've got an external framework file, which is importing from our variables and framework up here. And we've got our partials already copied and pasted into there. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now, in the builder, I think we've got on the front end, actually, sorry, I've got two different sites open at the moment. So now if we look at the advanced thema side of it. So that's the framework. Now, in advanced thema, we need to, for our settings, we've got to import the advanced thema settings from our examples. And this will overwrite all of your advanced thema settings. So if you're doing this right at the start, it makes sense. If you do this after you've already set it up, then it's going to mess up your AT settings. Okay, so that's done. And then when we did that, that's automatically created all of these variables that we wanted because it was imported from that theme setting. Okay, now the color palettes. Now, chatting with Maxime, yes, oops, could save that. Chatting with Maxime yesterday, the color palettes are not exported and imported with this export feature. They're a custom post. And to do that, you're going to have to use the WordPress export and import to do that, or just create your own. It's pretty simple anyway. So what I'm doing here is I've created a color palette called main. Now this is important here. In the settings, we need to add AT. Now all variables that I think come out of AT should have the AT prefix, because when we create simple things like if I create primary, we don't want a variable that just says primary, CSS variable, because that can clash with other plugins and other frameworks and whatnot. So by telling it to prefix with AT, we get AT dash primary. And I'll show you that when we get to that point. So we want to enable the shades. In the colors, we've got a primary, secondary. This is important because the framework references these. If you want to change these, you have to change the framework. So we're going to accent, action, and shade. And yes, ACSS uses this naming is pinched from ACSS. I was using ACSS, it made sense to me, so I'm just going to keep using the same thing. Now, with the shade, you can see you've got, with AT, you get 6 lighter versions and 6 darker versions. So what I'm going to do with the shade, I'm going to pick a color here where I can just see this gray on the right-hand side. And that's about right for me. So I've got some nice variation in that shade. Now I'm just going to pick some random colors for my, say, primary, secondary, and accents. And we'll make the action the same as the primary. Another subject that's probably for this is I use the action to be the same as the primary. I vary the brightness of it if the primary isn't working well with contrast ratios for A11Y or accessibility. So I tend to keep those colors pretty much the same. So that's all you do to create those colors. We publish this. And then we're ready to go. So now if I go to the front end, so what have we done? We've imported our theme settings. We've set up our import library here. Actually, no, we're not ready to go. I've got to check that we've got the right. That's the wrong. I might actually close some of these down because I'm getting confused between which. Right, seamless framework. Okay. So what we're going to do is open up a page here. Look at my CSS, and what's this 5 CSS? So it looks like 5 CSS in this case. So it's actually the ID that it gives it is the correct one. So we're going to have to copy that. Go back to the ATFW import. We're going to have to paste that in there so it gets the correct one. Save that. Now, on this page here, we're going to edit that with bricks. So click it. Locked up here, pages. What are we doing here? I'll test the scratch page. So edit with bricks. I'm using that local by flywheel, so sometimes it lags a little bit for some reason. So here's an empty page. If we check our advanced CSS variables, all of those variables are in there. So this is a completely fresh site. We've just gone through the process of importing the advanced theme settings, creating the colors, and then importing our framework into WPCodeBox. And we've got that all there now. So let's say we want to set up our theme settings. We're going to go to, I've got a default theme set here for our section. We're going to use, just clear that out. Actually, I've already set this up here. So let's say we want to be 4XL. So we're 80 size claim 4XL for our section is our default. Just going to clear these, and we'll add a section. There's something funky going on with my bricks here at the moment. It's not showing me all the settings it should do. Do an F5 here. Sorry, guys, you got a lot of demos. All of a sudden, this local site's decided to misbehave. All right, now it's correct. Okay, so basically, if we can add a section from here, it's automatically got our. Actually, that's set up incorrectly. Back to our section. Size linked. And that's fixed it, yeah. Okay, so there's our section, there's our container. Let's basically do what we did with the other one. So we're going to add a utility for image as background wrapper. We're going to add an image using the shortcuts from AT. So in the container. Got here, maybe we'll use that there. And we're going to add the image as background image. It's as simple as it is to use an image as a background. Actually, that should go there under this section. That's as simple as it is to use an actual image as a background in a section rather than a CSS background, which has a lot of benefits for SEO. So that's as simple as that. We can then add a title here and maybe some text. The container, we'll set our row gap to be gap of our content gap. We're going to set this heading here to an H1, make it a hero. And in our theme settings now, in our typography, we're going to select, where's our hero? Hero. We're going to use, that's from playing around before. So if we go to X font clamp 4XL, so a nice big font, that's way bigger than what we want it to be. And let's pick a color from automatic CSS, so make it this accent color. And now all we have to do to add a hero font is select that, make it an H1, doesn't have to be H1, make it a hero, it's done. So all of the AT variables from the framework can be used in here quite easily. So that is what it's all about. So I guess at this point here, I'll just open up to any questions or thoughts or issues that you might see with this. Anybody?
No, I think it's great. I guess one of my questions is, you were mentioning the colors that had to be manually fed out before. Was that in the README file as to what to name them so it matches the framework?
It is in here. I'm trying to think where I put it. Yeah, it is in here somewhere. Oh, actually, I'm going to probably write a little bit more here to explain what this is about.
Awesome.
But there is another something I didn't actually explain in here. In the examples here, I've also got a couple of bricks templates.
Okay.
Import, and I'll show you what that's for. So the ACSS demo. So these two templates here give you these pages here. So you got a framework doc template, and that explains about the colors.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, the reason we're using primary, secondary, accent, and shade is because in the WPCodeBox, in the variables, that's the names we're putting in here for the colors.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. If you change the name of those colors, you can just change this in the variables, and then you can go to the actual framework, and this should iterate through all of those colors. So for example, those buttons, it's just iterating through all the colors that you've named.
Perfect.
Right, so
Awesome.
you can change it if you want to. Now, the other thing here, so the other bricks template is the style guide. And that automatically, as long as we use those same colors, color names, this automatically populates. All these values here are automatically populated by JavaScript. So, for example, I've got this black, sorry, my primary color there. If I go to that and I change my bricks color palettes and in my primary, I'm going to make my primary a different color. Make that, say, I don't know, this purplish color here, because it looks beautiful. Let's refresh that. So these colors change and all these values change as well.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yep. So you only have to change the color in the AT custom post type, and these automatically change. The same with these the topography. So all the topography. One thing I kind of like about being focused on bricks alone is that you use the bricks system to do all this. So when you set this up, you would actually go into your theme settings, and in your topography, you would set up all of your theme styling here, and you can use all of those AT variables. So, for example, the heading 1 is AT font, actually a hangover. If I make that 3XL, AT font clamp 3XL, then that will automatically update these. Okay, so this here, all these styles for this are set in the bricks theme settings. All of this is picked up by JavaScript, so that just has a look at what that is and automatically updates these.
Very
so
cool.
for your style guide, you don't have to change anything, but you just have to change your colors, and then you change your font definitions in bricks, and then your style guide is correct. Yeah. And then there's the class-based topography. So in bricks with the hero, when you select a type of hero, it actually adds this class.
Okay.
So it's not actually a semantic HTML heading. It's an actual class that they add, and the same with the lead. And then I've just added one more. I've just called font accent. And again, these automatically update when you change those.
Very cool.
All right, so that's the concept. I think it's a lot to cover. There could be some confusion in there. I'll look back through this and see what I can improve on explaining. But I think this is just the idea. If we want to progress it, then we'll look at doing some separate videos that are specifically on a topic.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, guys. We got Ernesto back again.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah.
So, any questions, Ernesto, or you're all good with that?
No, I just gonna. Will you put this up in YouTube? Don't you?
Sorry,
will you put this up on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, yes.
Okay. Oh no, I just gonna follow step by step what you did here. Watching on YouTube. Yeah, it looks really good. Yeah. I like it. Okay. I think it will help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just this is me just dumping as to how I'd like to work with it. I've renamed some things and changed some things to be more like what they should be. Because like when you dive into things, you do things and you come back to it later and you change things and you end up with a bit of a spaghetti mess. So before doing too much with this, I just wanted to get it to a point where I'm happy to use it. So I've been mucking around creating pages, creating content using this just to see how it works. I'm really happy with it. I think it's simplifies the whole process. The only complicated part is getting it set up in the first place. Yeah.
It looks. I think it's quite handy anyway.
Okay.
It's quite handy to set up the whole process, to follow the process that you just did there.
Yeah. All right. Well, a very loose chat, but well, hopefully you get something out of that, and just reach out if you want any help with it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. I will end this here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.